I'm delighted to say Laura Dodsworth is here, returned from a trip abroad. We don't have to give away where. But you're looking very healthy and happy and, you know, generally good, I would say.
Glowing?
Glowing,
we
yes.
can go with glowing if you like.
Glowing.
Well, that'd be because I escaped a week of British weather.
Yes.
So.
Although, you know, I must say, I came in today and came out of the house, thought, this is all right. Sun, as long as the sun's shining, I don't mind it cool. I don't really want to be lying in bed wondering if I'm going to be able to go to sleep because it's too hot.
I know, it feels like we've had grey, rainy weather for about a month.
The weekend
though,
wasn't
and
very nice.
It's been a bit much, hasn't it?
No, that is true. And we do talk about the weather a lot here because we're sort of obsessed with it. But it's always been like that.
We've got these big windows, you know, that draws to attention. But, I mean, of course you're talking about the weather because the weather's put in front of us in the news, on TV, in the media, 24/7.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be in a permanent state of hypervigilance and anxiety, panic even, about global warming. And of course they have to try extra hard because the weather here is so dull and
I mean,
grey
all these, you know, all these sort of climate nutters who are going on about Maui now, who've previously never heard of Maui, never been anywhere near it, couldn't tell you where it is on a map, couldn't tell you what all the other islands in the Hawaiian island archipelago are, couldn't tell you even whether, you know, Dano was a real character in Hawaii Five-0, you know, but suddenly now they're all experts on Maui and the way that it was constructed and the way that it was colonised and the way that it was taken over by sugar plantation, horrible people, and it's their fault. So they're not even blaming global warming or global boiling anymore. They're now blaming colonialism, which is, of course, all the rage today, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned colonialism, actually. I mean, we could go on about the weather for ages, but you and I have done that before almost
but I very cleverly
ceaselessly.
linked us into the next section.
You know I want to talk to you about colonialism, gender and the NHS. But the way that this word keeps creeping its way into so many stories is everything that you need to know about this movement. Now, I say movement, this isn't to imply that I think it's controlled by a singular entity or that there are puppet masters pulling our strings. I think instead there's a kind of a constellation of interest, but it does inform a movement that has now been in progress for decades.
Yes.
And it is designed entirely to undermine us, to undermine our self-perception, and our self-worth. So everything is to be pinned on colonialism. The latest story was reported in the Mail this week that various NHS Foundation trusts have been found to explain in very unscientific terms that actually a lot of the problems we have with gender now are due to colonialism.
Right. Why is that?
You're not going to be able to find an adequate answer. You normally hear stories about how there are African cultures where they have trans deities or they don't have gender-based language. Now, that may or may not be true, but of course it's a huge distraction from the fact that what the NHS is doing is rewriting biology textbooks, putting mixed-sex wards in, mixed-sex toilets, using language which is totally denigratory to women, like uterus havers, menstruators, pregnant people. So it's a big distraction, but let's be distracted just for a moment, shall we? The idea that it's our fault as the British, that our colonialism has mixed up some weird gender-free utopia of a world is plain nonsense. Look at Afghanistan right now. I don't see the British there, do you? And they banned girls from secondary school.
They did. Well, is that our fault?
Oh, well,
probably.
Let's wait. Let's wait.
Probably.
No,
but what about, you know, what about the fact that only apparently Britain was ever involved in colonial activity? Because these people who are anti-British, in my view, are also pro-European very much. But they don't go on about Belgium or France or Spain or Portugal, who were colonising parts of the world before we ever got anywhere near them.
Well, we hear a lot, of course, about the anti-British strain of anti-colonialism, but I'm sure it exists in some kind of form throughout Europe because it's a very rampant infection which is supposed to be undermining all kinds of Western cultures, I think. I mean, another example, though, of where we didn't get it wrong was it's the British who stamped out the practice of Hindu widows immolating themselves on their husbands' funeral pyres. Look, the fact is that sex is immutable. It's a biological reality, which means you've got two sexes everywhere you go, which means you've got sexism wherever you go, and you've got sex-based violence wherever you go. You can pretend there's this magical kind of feeling called gender, of which there are infinite varieties, but it will never undo the fact there are two sexes. So I think these NHS Foundation trusts are rightly being called out on some absolutely diabolically nonsensical, anti-scientific policy documents.
I've got a new phrase for them. Do you know what it is? Reality deniers.
I like that. I've been thinking about that as well, that it's kind of worth turning the language around.
Yeah, let's turn it back on them, because they're always calling people deniers in one, like they seem to think that's a powerful way of linking everything to the Holocaust, right? So why don't we use that word, deniers, because they're denying reality.
And it's a bit like the term anti-hate.
Yeah.
You know, people adopt that as though then if you question anything, you must be pro-hate.
Yeah.
So it's to create this false dichotomy in this polarisational time. So sure, let's switch around. Because essentially it is reality denial. I was gobsmacked to see that there are NHS trusts that describe that sex is assigned at birth by a medical practitioner based upon observable characteristics. Now, let's just call this what it is. Basically, a doctor sees either a penis or a vulva and knows that the baby's a boy or a girl.
Yeah.
They know they're a boy or a girl.
Really
they're not assigning sex.
No.
This language is deliberately designed to obscure reality, to confuse you, to bamboozle you. Now, you have to be super wary of any movement, and this is a movement that tries to bamboozle you and confuse you, because it's a hallmark of horrible regimes forever.
Yes.
They break you down to build you up. So from now on, I think we have to call time on it. I've lost all patience with it myself. We have to call time on it. And it's actually the duty of everybody, not just to kind of nod politely in the corner, but to speak up. This is why there's a chapter in my new book called Be the First to Speak Up.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about free speech a lot, and yet so many people don't exercise it when it's important.
Yeah.
We've got to stop going along with
I meet people
these ludicrous ideas.
I would say a weekly basis, not necessarily a daily basis, who say, oh, well, I don't really feel I can talk about that. And you go, well, why not? Well, I just don't think I should have a view on that. And that's what the sort of the anti-free speech people want, don't they? They want to scare people into not speaking. They want to scare you into not having an opinion, or having an opinion that only they should agree with. I actually had a conversation with somebody on, I know it's ridiculous, on social media, Twitter, as I'm still calling it, even though some people are saying it's not that anymore, who actually said that, you know, some opinions are wrong and indefensible. Well, really? Well, who's going to decide what they are? And who says that any opinion is wrong? Because surely an opinion is just that. It's an opinion. You can make a judgment about something. You can get your facts wrong, but you can't get your opinions wrong, can you?
Well, we don't think of ourselves as living under a tyranny, but in many ways we are living in quite a tyrannical world, where there are certain people who set themselves up as... Oh, I'm sorry.
You said that word. It's the tyrannical alarm.
They set themselves up as the guardians of virtue and morality.
But yeah, we haven't
and
appointed
speech.
them. We haven't asked them to be the guardians. We haven't asked them to represent us. There has been no election or referendum.
I mean, like, forget about the gender madness in the NHS, which is now, you know, it's very widely reported.
Very much so.
I think we have to tackle more this idea about everything colonial being bad.
Yes.
Look, to say that everything the British Empire did is bad is as plainly ludicrous as trying to whitewash all of the crimes of the empire.
Right.
You know, you have to take a nuanced view of history.
Yeah.
There are good things, there are bad things. Singapore seems quite well off for it. Zimbabwe doesn't. But to blame everything that we perceive as wrong in the world, whether it's climate change or some crazy idea that we don't need single-sex wards in hospitals on colonialism, is madness. And that is latched onto, this idea of colonialism is latched onto to undermine you, the individual, but also your communities and your nation, to make you feel not just not proud of yourself and your nation, but to make you feel ashamed. And that is no way forward for a country, to feel ashamed of itself. So we have to call time on that as well. You can take a nuanced view of both the advantages and disadvantages of our history, but we shouldn't be going forward into our future feeling ashamed of ourselves. No. It's an insidious movement.
And also, ignorance of anything is never good. And the kind of whitewashing of something because you don't like it is also not good. You know, there were plenty of things that were terrible going on in many of these countries that were colonised before anybody ever colonised them. You know, the caste system in India, you know, let's see you stand up and make a case for that if you're so anti-British, right? Because the caste system was responsible for the most horrific things, in the same way that the Mayans, who were killed off by Cortez, supposedly, because he gave them all syphilis, you know, used to sacrifice virgins, throw them into a pit of water, and take them up a pyramid and stab them and take their heart out and hold it up like that. You know, brilliant. Very good. Well, we should have left them to do that. So that when you went to Cancun for your summer holidays, you know, you stand... Well, obviously not you. Some people run the risk of being, you know, sacrificed.
Well, maybe this is the problem with climate today, Mike. We're not sacrificing enough people to the climate gods. Maybe that's
they probably like that. Wrong. There was a great video that I saw. I thought of you actually. I don't know why it was.
Oh,
out
here
there,
we go.
It was a New York Times journalist on some trip. Presumably it had some political connection, but it was a dairy farm in the Midwest somewhere. And the woman who's the dairy farmer said to the New York Times, you didn't see the question, but said to the New York Times reporter, well, maybe what you should do is come over here and try and milk the cow, and then after that go over there and milk the bull and see how you get on.
There we go.
The point was very clearly made.
Well,
and the New York Times reporter shrugged her shoulders.
Because what can you say? It's all just a big, massive pretense. Like I say, we've really got to call time on it. And I think it's more important than just standing up for the truth and feeling good about ourselves nature. I think it's actually much more important than that. It's back in 2016, Camille Paglia warned at the Battle of Ideas Festival that actually our culture's obsession with transgenderism foretells the decline of civilization. According to her, she said that a hallmark of civilizational collapse throughout history, over and over again, is the rise of androgyny. Yeah. It's a similar story to the one told by J.D. Unwin in his book Sex and Culture, which we reference in one of our more controversial chapters of the book, Free Your Mind. His book was called Sex and Culture, and he said that there are various markers of civilizational decline to do with, sexual depravity or giving up on premarital chastity. Now, this may sound very old-fashioned to some people, but if he's right, we're in the throes of civilizational decline now.
I think there's no question. I say this a lot, that there's nothing so much as the kind of decline of values and decline of tradition, which heralds that, because in the end people have got less and less to worry about. They're more and more secure, they're more and more well off, despite what we hear from doctors on 120,000 a year who can't afford to buy their lunch. People are much better off now in the Western world than they've ever been, and probably in the rest of the world as well, and yet they want to change everything because they're not unhappy enough.
I know. Has a culture ever had such a useless grip on the truth?
No.
And I tell you what, this puts me off the NHS even more.
Yeah.
Because, we think of it as our national religion in some ways. Well, this is a religion I just don't think I can worship at its altar anymore. Right. I don't want to see doctors or nurses who don't think sex is real. Right. I don't want to see doctors and nurses who think that the idea that single-sex wards are anything to do with colonialism. Right. They've lost their grip on reality. I mean, I have an elderly relative who's really worried about going to hospital and finding herself on a ward where there are men.
Yeah, well, we saw a
this is becoming something that's making people
want to
see their doctor.
And some of the men who are allowed onto female-only wards are only identifying as female occasionally, not even, all the time. So
I don't even know which is worse, Mike.
Well, I don't even know
which is worse.
In that case. Let's talk about another part of the NHS, which is in the news today, and this weight loss jab.
Oh, my goodness.
Because lots of people are going, oh, this is great, isn't it? And I'm not so sure it is.
My instinct is always, with these things, you have to ask cui bono. Well, you think, the people who want to lose weight will benefit because here's a magic jab. They can jab their way to thinness.
For those who don't know what cui bono is, that means who benefits.
Who benefits. I look at it and I think, it's another miracle cure from pharmaceutical. Oh, so I've just called somebody there. Sorry. I'm on my own little rant here, missing your brilliant jokes. I'm sorry, Mike. I look at this and I think who benefits? Well, probably a pharmaceutical company selling us some kind of inordinate... The problem is, by the time you give people a jab for being obese, it's too late. Yeah. Really, we need to go back to the beginning of the problem, which is early in life, but we need to go back earlier than that. Why have we become the fat man of Europe in the last 30 to 40 years? We never used to be.
No.
And so it's going to be complex, it's going to be multifactorial. There are lots of theories as to why 2/3 of this country is now overweight and obese. Yeah. That's quite, I'm sorry to say, it's quite shameful to be...
I would say so.
To be so obese. It's not a good look in all senses of the word. So where did it come from? Obesity is very much tied to poverty. So we can't ignore the fact that there's something about the economic environment which makes it harder for people from lower socioeconomic classes to eat well. But, government health advice, dietary advice also changed at the time we started getting fatter. It went away from a traditional diet and into this kind of high carbohydrate, high fibre diet, eat 5 a day. There's a really good book on this called The Obesity Epidemic by Dr. Zoe Harcombe. It's considered by some to be quite controversial, but It's fascinating, you know, when you read it and you learn that some things were totally not based on any evidence, like 5 a day. I mean, sure, eat your fruit and veg. I'm not saying people shouldn't, but it's not based on any evidence.
No.
I don't think there's any evidence.
No, I just think it's good for you.
Do you know which food is the richest in vitamin C?
I don't know. I would imagine oranges, because that's what they kind of try and tell you. Liver?
We get a lot of misinformation about food. So, I mean, recently there was a study that's just come out, published by Harvard University, among 10,000 people with type 2 diabetes. And when they ate a low carbohydrate diet, they were 24% less likely to die early from any cause. Right. I think that's the result of it. I'm going to tweet this afterwards. So, you know, there are some doctors now in this UK who are putting people forward for low-carb diets, which is something that the Public Health Collaboration charity suggests. You know, is it, in fact, our whole approach to eating that's wrong? We're eating a lot of ultra-processed foods.
I think we are.
When I was a kid, here we go, I've just come back from holiday. Now, when I was a kid, when we went away, when we went on a day trip, we took sandwiches and cling film and a little carton of juice each. Yeah. I'm not saying that was the healthiest thing to eat, but nowadays, of course, people just don't think anything of going into a supermarket and buying a meal deal or a Burger King. So we're eating a lot of processed food, junk food. And actually, the natural human diet is more... It's more animal products.
Isn't it also,
you know, it's meat,
that
fish,
people
eggs,
but
fruits, vegetables.
You're also now less likely to be told, you know, that there's a problem with being fat. You're more likely to be told that you should be proud of your body, no matter what shape it is, and no matter how fat you are, and no matter how skinny you are. So there's no kind of stigma anymore to being big or to being obese, and so people don't care.
I mean, it is definitely becoming normalised, and yet I think there are people that will jump at this opportunity to have the jab. Everything about it, for me, feels... like a contraindication to health, though. I gather you can get the jab without seeing your doctor if you have the NHS
Apparently
app.
so.
No, I don't have the NHS app. I don't use apps to run my life on my phone at all. I try to use my phone as little as possible, despite it ringing while I was on air with you. But I use it for phone calls, texts and communication. I don't even have banking apps on my phone, so I don't have the NHS app.
Right.
So the idea that the way to health is to have a smartphone with an app and get an injection feels like it's fundamentally wrong. Yeah. I think we need to turn our idea of what healthy living is
upside down. Also, we don't even know
yet
if it's got a long-term benefit, this thing, or not, you know. There are people I'm seeing, and I have no reason to disbelieve them, saying that they know people who have taken the jab. It's basically an appetite suppressant. And so when you're on it, you don't feel like eating. But when you stop taking it, then you go back to where you were. So... it's supposed to train you into eating less. But if the reason you eat more than you should is because you can't help it, or because you've got some psychological, you know, relationship with food, then the jab isn't going to help you.
Well, I'm innately sceptical, because everything this government does to tackle obesity fails. You know, there are some people who are just technocratic tinkerers at heart, and they just want to control everything. You know, tax sugar. Well, if that was working, we wouldn't still be getting fatter. Right. Oh, tax junk food. Well, if that worked, we wouldn't still be getting fatter. Right. You know what? Bring back home economics at school. My kids didn't really learn how to make proper food at school. Do that.
But
people
neither did I,
just need to be taught again. You have to make food.
But I didn't learn how to make food at school, but I learned how to make food when I left school. You know, what's wrong with that? How difficult is that?
Didn't you have home economics?
No.
Did you go to a boys' school?
Yeah.
There we go.
Of course we didn't. We didn't even have biology lessons in my school, because it was Catholic boys' grammar school, and I'm pretty sure they thought if we tell them that it's biological, they won't believe in God. So they didn't tell us any of that. But I managed to do okay. You know, managed to father 4 children, managed to become quite a good cook. Guess what? I learned how to do all that stuff after I left school. You know, maybe we should have a jab for people who are stupid.
I don't think that would work either. What we need for that, just like you need good food for good health and a good weight, you need good books for a good mind. It's pretty simple. It's just that people don't want to do they don't want to take the harder route. They want the easy route. But part of this easy route, which you could also call lazy as part of the problem, it's almost like, now don't get me wrong, I've got a lot of sympathy for people who are obese and struggling to lose weight, but it's almost like a lazy solution, and which isn't. It's not going to fix the underlying problem. What are you going to do? Let kids get really fat until they're old enough to qualify for an injection? It doesn't make any sense. We have to go back to the beginning of the problem.
But this is it. Now we live in a world where, I'm sorry, I can't get to Dubai, but look, here's a pair of high-vis glasses that you can wear, and basically you give virtual reality trip to Dubai. It doesn't work. We've got a clip for you, though, which we want to play. And it's the woman who is about to be in the new Snow White film, describing why Snow Woke is no more.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story, with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
So no prince, or a different kind of prince?
We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story, just because like we cast a guy in the movie,
Right.
Andrew Burnap, great dude.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I think everyone's going to have their assumptions about what it's actually going to be, but it's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
Rachel Zegler.
Wow.
Apparently Snow White is not a love story, and the prince is a stalker, and he may actually have all of his scenes cut from the film. Is the new version of Snow Woke. Brilliant.
Wow. I mean, she displayed such breathtaking humility.
I know.
She's not going to be at all embarrassed about that in the future, is she?
I think she might make it onto Plank of the Week.
I mean, this is something I really don't like, and it's the remaking of stories which have existed in one form or
Make up
another
your own
for
story.
hundreds or thousands of years.
Yeah.
So they, what's his name? Is it Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones?
Yeah, I don't know.
He took offence to the dwarfs being... You said, you've made a Hispanic Snow White, congratulations, but the dwarfs are still short, so now they're not even going to be dwarves anymore. I mean, they're turning everything upside
Snow White
down.
and the Seven Dwarfs,
It's not
but they're
about
not
love
dwarfs.
anymore. Now, I will say that fairy tales do contain some very dark messages. Another thing that she said about Snow White was that she found it very scary when she watched it as a child. I agree.
It's meant
the
to be scary.
scariest film
It
I
is scary.
ever saw when I was
but
young.
it's meant to be.
But it's meant to be. Fairy tales are frightening, and they do contain some dark messages. But these speak to very deep archetypes that live in our unconscious.
Yeah.
You can mess with it if you want. You're not going to make a great story. Snow White has existed in one form or another for hundreds of years, like all the fairy tales do. And there is this kind of semi-disturbing theme that exists within them, that women are asleep until they're kissed and woken up by a prince.
Yeah.
It's got some dark aspects to it, but it's also an enduring love story.
But
and
why
to
do people
pretend,
have to-
to
hang
pretend
on.
that it shouldn't be about love is a really weird message to give people.
Why do people have to assume it's about all women? It's about Snow White, one woman. It's not a message for all women that you can only be awoken by a prince with a kiss, is it?
No, of course, because it's also a message for men that they can be strong, heroic and save people. I mean, the prince is getting a really rough time in this. Oh, his scenes might be cut.
Right.
Oh, men, you're so superfluous. It's
Yeah.
like Barbie all over again.
Yeah.
It's a very consistent theme at the moment in society, and as a mother of sons, I don't really welcome it at all. Women and men can be different. They have a lot in common. They're complementary, and they're both to be accepted, welcomed and celebrated.
I think the answer to all of this is that if you want to make a story about a woman without a prince in it who saves her, make your own story.
And no dwarfs.
Leave the story, yeah. And
It's
no
not
dwarfs.
Snow White
Snow White's
anymore.
not really for you. You know, make your own story, write your own story, you know, sing the theme tune, write the theme tune, do all that, and then produce it and put it out there. But don't ruin a perfectly good story which has already been successfully produced and written and performed many times over.
Do you remember, though, that when the sensitivity readers came for the Roald Dahl books,
Yes.
and I said, well, wait till they find the fairy tales, wait till they get hold of Grimm, the Grimm's fairy tales. This is going to happen over and over.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
Hansel and
Wait
Gretel.
for the Cinderella rewrite, Hansel and Gretel, all of them.
There was always
The
something a bit odd
Swan
about them,
Princess. Oh, they
Hansel
won't
and
like
Gretel.
that.
I like the John Cooper Clarke poem. You might not remember John Cooper Clarke, but he was the punk poet, and he had a line in one of his poems where he said, "You make life a fairy tale, grim." It was good. Anyway, there we are. Laura Dodsworth, thank you very much. We haven't had a chance to get onto the gender-neutral toilets. We'll do that next time.